All right, so at this point, right, we're kind of close to finishing off the first surface, but we need to set another rotation, and this is where the line work, right, the wires are going to get a little crazy. Okay, so just you're going to see a very long spaghetti-like string, and we'll clean it up when we actually create the compound rotations. We are going to rotate the top curve and then create a new surface. There might be a way to do it without actually creating a surface first, but what I found was very easy was to create an intermediate surface. And by I say intermediate is that we're going to have to create a second surface over top of it with our now rotated top curve. Okay, so it's a good thing that we brought up the clarity about which geometry is live and which ones we're using, because that's going to come into play. So I will say this, what we're going to do is rotate 3D, because I'm going to take the normal of this surface to establish a rotation. And so the trouble I'm having here is that what I need to do here is either establish another perpendicular plane or find some other way to orient a plane to this new location. But let me show you the trouble with doing that. So if you go to, well, you don't have to do this. I just want to show you the trouble in doing it. So curve analysis, perpendicular frame. So perpendicular frame now, if I drop that on there and I copy the same number, it gives me a plane at the end of the surface. However, when I rotate it, it doesn't rotate the plane. The plane stays oriented to the XY axis. So you see the problem with that is that if I choose to rotate this curve based on an axis here, it's going to give me a problem because this axis is not always constant. And it'll create a warped surface. Or I should say this axis is not always perpendicular, it is always constant. Sorry. So let me get rid of that. So what we're going to do is find the normal of the surface and use that as a rotation. But we want to set the point. We're going to use that as the axis of rotation, but we're not going to use it as the center point of rotation. And there's this pretty cool one under transform, Euclidean. We're going to use rotate 3D. And if you read the description, it says rotate an object around a center point and an axis vector. So it gives us the opportunity to separate the rotation basis direction from the actual location that we rotated around, which is different than a lot of the other rotates that you have. So I'm going to put this over here because we got to do a lot of stuff in between to get there, right? I said we need to find the surface normal. So how do we do that? Right, evaluate surface. So under, oh, let me get this on here. Okay. So we're going to go under surface analysis, and we're going to do evaluate surface. Now, evaluate surface is going to give us a normal, but what's the other pair to it? Yes, surface closest point. Now these two go together. I like to put them in this little configuration here. And what it's asking for is obviously the point to map on the surface, and then also the surface that it's going to evaluate. So for us, that surface is this loft. And the point is going to be a centroid, or really any point that I wanted to map on the surface, but I'll just grab the centroid because it's easy and I'm used to doing it. And now I've got my normal right there in the center of the surface, perfectly mapped. If I rotate the surface, it rotates with it. That's important. Okay, so I need a geometry to rotate. I need a angle in radians, so I'm going to use some of that stuff again. I need a center of rotation, and I need the axis of rotation. So I mentioned that we're going to rotate around the normal, so clearly the axis of rotation is going to be the normal that we just created. Now, again, the geometry that we're going to modify is the same geometry that we modified by rotating it. When we rotated it negative 15 degrees and positive 15 degrees, we're just going to modify it and create another curve that is rotated again, but in a different orientation. Now, if you're looking at me in a really confused way. Yeah, you'll see when it's done. And so the other two left that we have to establish are the angle, which is easy. We just copy this information over. And the center point. And the center point's not quite as easy, but it can get easy. So basically, I want to rotate it based on either point on the surface. Oh, let me kind of just start here, actually. So one of the things you'll notice here is that the edge, right now you can actually see it's already rotating. It defaulted the center point to be the center point of the normal that I've established. I can override that. I could leave it as is, or I can override it. But right now, as I'm rotating it, you see it'll rotate off of the plane like that. And that's not all bad. In fact, any rotation we do is going to pull it a little bit off the plane, or at least off the extents of the plane. But what I want to do is set a base point on one of my corners. So either here or there, and just kind of yank it down a little bit. Because if I can yank it down a little bit, then I'll have a little bit more control over the height, an exact height. So if I say 25, I know that one side will at least be 25. So to do that, under the curve analysis panel, there's this one called Endpoints. And it's just a little shortcut that I can use to select one point or the other. Oops, wrong one. All right, so that's my endpoints, and I can use that as a center of rotation. So now the difference here is that I can go up or I can go down. Up or down. And I will point out something else that can be considered. This particular definition is built so that the length of all the rotation edges are the same. So essentially what's going to happen is that it's really hard to see on screen, I guess, but right here you see the line, because it's a rotation, actually pulled off of the extents of the surface. That can be changed. You would have to use, well, you could map a point to that other edge and just change the height along that other edge and then create a new curve. But all these things are you know, they're going to have to deal with the circumstance of how you want it to operate. What I've chosen is that I want to do it all in rotations. If you're working on something else and you choose a different method where it has to be the extents, then it's going to look a little bit different, but at least you have the knowledge to do the basis. All right, so let's finish this one off. The last part that I want to do here is my second curve. So let me pull this curve a little bit up off the top. My second surface, and that's the one that we're gonna use for our actual form. We can go to Surface, Freeform, and Loft. And Loft is going to use, obviously, the new curve that we've created, but it's also going to use the original curve at the bottom, right? Because that hasn't changed. So I need to grab the original curve and plug it into Loft. And I need to grab my new curve and plug that also into Loft. And so here is our modifiable surface. Looks like this. You're going to get some stretchiness where it kind of falls off the corner. And that's okay for our purposes today. So at this, yes? Yeah, the original line. So right now there's a lot of stuff coming off of this original line. I'll help you out. Yes. Yep. Oh, what's being connected to this?
The endpoint.
I'm confused. This one?
Yeah.
This?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that. It's the rotation line. Any other questions? Okay. So before we move on to the compound rotations, I'm going to start setting us up for a clean file. So I'll show you guys how to really control your wireless displays and block information so that you can read it easily.